The stones stand like sentinels at dawn on Salisbury Plain, 16 uprights arranged in a rough circle, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain, their edges softened into silent curves. The morning mist clings to the grass between them, drifting across the hollowed-out center where ancient grass still grows, untouched for longer than memory can hold. One stone leans slightly inward, its face scarred with faint grooves. Perhaps a mark left by hands long turned to dust, perhaps something older than we understand. This is Stonehenge, but not as it was. Not in the way most people imagine it, not as a grand monument of some lost civilization standing alone on a windswept plain. The truth is quieter. It's in the arrangement, the deliberate spacing between stones that aligns with the sunrise on the summer solstice, though no one knows if they intended that alignment or simply found the pattern by chance. It's in the bluestones, some weighing over 4 tons each, transported more than 200 kilometers from the Preseli Hills in Wales, hauled across rugged terrain and up steep slopes with tools of antler and wood. The people who built this did not write their names or leave letters behind. They left only stone, shaped by hands that knew how to lift, balance, and place without modern machinery. The site was never finished. There are gaps where stones should be, foundations laid but never raised. It is a construction in progress, interrupted at some unknown moment. Yet we do not know who built it, why they chose this place, or whether the circle was ever completed as imagined. We can measure the angles and weigh the rocks, but the meaning remains veiled behind layers of time, interpretation, and silence. The stones stand where they were placed 5,000 years ago, unmoved by empire, war, or change, and in their stillness, they ask a question that has no answer yet. What did it mean to them? Across the wind-swept moors of northern England, along the mist-laden slopes of the Welsh hills, and in the sun-baked fields of southern Ireland, stone circles rise like silent witnesses from a time long before written history. These are not monuments built in haste or by chance. Each circle is carefully placed, each standing stone precisely aligned with celestial bodies, each ring formed with deliberate care over generations. The earliest among them date back to the Neolithic period, roughly 5,000 years ago, when farming had only just begun to take root across the British Isles. It was a time of slow transformation. People who once lived by hunting and gathering were learning to plow fields, cultivate barley and wheat, and settle into small villages near rivers and fertile land. The landscape then was not as we know it. Woodlands stretched wide across what are now open pastures. The climate was milder than today's, but harsh enough that survival depended on understanding seasons, weather patterns, and the movement of stars. These early communities were neither nomadic nor fully settled in cities, but something in between, seasonal dwellers with deep ties to their land and sky. The stone circles did not appear overnight. They emerged over centuries, layered with meaning and memory. Some are modest, dozens of stones arranged in a rough circle, but others, like Stonehenge or the Ring of Brodgar, speak of vast resources, coordinated labor, and shared belief systems that stretch far beyond any single village. Archaeologists have found nearby settlements, cremated burials, animal bones, and tools scattered near these circles, evidence not just of use but of ritual. Yet we do not know who built them, nor why they were built in such precise geometric forms. Were they calendars, altars, gathering places for kinship groups? The answers remain uncertain. What is certain is that their construction required immense effort and cooperation across generations, testaments to a people whose thoughts reach beyond the immediate into time itself. What we know begins with stone, hundreds of tons of it, arranged in arcs and rings across the hills and moors of Britain and Ireland. The circles themselves are the most visible traces, massive stones, some weighing several tons, set upright into the earth, many aligned with celestial bodies like the rising sun at winter solstice or the moon's extreme northern rise. But the stones alone do not speak. Their meaning must be inferred through what lies beneath them, the fragile remains of human activity. Archaeological excavations have revealed post holes where wooden posts once stood, shallow pits filled with ash and burnt bone fragments, and occasional burial cairns tucked within or near the circles. These remnants suggest ritual use, perhaps ceremonies tied to seasonal cycles, but not certainty. Radiocarbon dating offers a timeline, though not without uncertainty. When charcoal from hearths or human remains is found beneath stones or in nearby ditches, it can be dated, but only when associated directly with construction or use. The dates cluster between 3000 and 1500 BCE, roughly the Neolithic to early Bronze Age, but they rarely pinpoint a single creation event. Some circles may have been built over generations, modified in phases, their purpose shifting through time. Aerial photography reveals patterns invisible on foot, ring ditches, hinges, stone alignments stretching across landscapes. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry scans detect subsurface anomalies, buried walls, pits, or post structures without disturbing the site. These non-invasive methods allow us to map complex sites like Stonehenge or Callanish without excavation. Yet even with such tools, evidence remains fragmentary. Most circles are not fully excavated, many remain untouched by modern archaeology. What survives is a partial record, stone arrangements shaped by human hands, but the intentions behind them, whether spiritual, social, astronomical, or communal, are inferred from limited data. We can describe how they were made and when, but not why, with absolute clarity. The truth lies in the gaps as much as in what remains. They woke before dawn, drawn from sleep by the low hum of wind through the stones and the quiet stir of woolen blankets. The air bit at exposed skin, sharp with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke drifting up from the hearth. Children stirred beneath hides stretched over frame poles, mothers pulled on layered linen, their fingers brushing rough baskets woven from willow and reed. There was no time for stillness, work moved like a current through every day. In the fields beyond the enclosures, men and women bent low to pull roots and weeds, their backs shaped by years of tending barley and oats. The soil was thin, stubborn, but they knew its rhythms, the first frost, the turning of the sun across the sky. They planted not for wealth or legacy, but for breath, for tomorrow's porridge, for the child's next meal. Homes were modest, low domes of timber and wattle, daubed with clay to keep out the cold. Inside, warmth came from the central fire, where meat might be roasted slowly over coals shared around a single bowl. There was no written law, but there was memory, how much grain had been stored, who had brought wood that week, whose child had fallen ill. They did not know why they raised the stones, only that someone must have asked, and someone listened. They looked at them in silence, perhaps walking past on a long path to the river, or back from hunting deer in the uplands. The circles were not their home, but something older than memory, something beyond knowing. And so, each day passed in quiet persistence, tending fire, shaping tools, watching clouds move over the hills. They did not dream of empires or fame. They lived for survival, for kinship, for the slow breath of earth turning beneath them. What they thought about the stones, whether fear, reverence, awe, remains unrecorded. But their hands shaped the world in ways we still feel, a rhythm of work, love, and quiet endurance that outlasts even stone. The true mystery does not lie in how they were built, though that remains a feat of collective effort and prehistoric engineering. Hundreds of tons of stone hauled across uneven terrain, shaped by flint chisels and wooden levers, arranged with deliberate symmetry. The deeper question is why? What did these circles mean? To stand among them today is to feel the weight of absence. No written records, no surviving language, no direct testimony from those who raised the stones. We are left not with answers, but with silence thick enough to press against the ears. There is a recurring patterned stone circles scattered across moors and river valleys, some aligned with solstices, others facing ceremonial axes toward hills or rivers. Some have internal arrangements, central monoliths, axial stones, concentric rings. The most famous, Stonehenge, Callanish, Newgrange, are not isolated. They belong to a wider cultural network stretching from the Orkney Islands to Cornwall, across time and terrain. But what connects them? Is it ritual, astronomy, ancestor veneration, a place of gathering for communities bound by shared belief? We know people lived near these sites, evidence of habitation, burials, tools, but no definitive proof that they were temples or observatories. The alignment with celestial events is suggestive but not conclusive. Similar patterns appear in other cultures without the same interpretation. Some circles are open to the sky, some have roofs or covered ways, yet we cannot say whether they were places of worship, feasting, initiation rites, or something altogether different. The central dynamic lies in this gap between what the stones are and what we believe they might have been. The evidence points toward ritual significance, communal effort, deep time awareness, but it never closes the loop. We can describe the form, measure the alignment, analyze the stone types, but to speak of purpose is to enter a realm beyond data, the quiet space where human intention meets silence, and history becomes something more than fact, a fragile act of imagination. The great stone circles did not rise in silence, nor did they stand forever. Their construction marked a turning point, not sudden, but slow, like the deepening of shadows at dusk. As generations passed, something in the rhythm of life began to shift. The Neolithic world was one of seasonal gathering, shared labor, and communal memory etched into standing stone. But around the time these circles reached their height, a quiet fracture emerged in the fabric of that way of life. The evidence is fragile. Layers of earth, fragments of bone, traces of fire on stone. But they speak of change. Some sites show signs of abandonment, stones left half-hewn, ritual objects buried beneath collapsed structures. Others reveal new patterns. Pits filled with cremated remains, the careful placement of bones not in burial mounds but near standing stones, suggesting a reordering of belief and practice. There is no clear moment when this shift began, only a gradual drift from collective monument building toward more dispersed, localized rituals. Some scholars suggest climate change may have played a role, subtle shifts in temperature or rainfall that disrupted agriculture and forced communities to adapt. Others point to the increasing complexity of social organization, perhaps with emerging leadership roles or new ways of marking status through objects rather than monumental architecture. There is no single cause we can name with certainty. What is clear is that something changed. The grand alignment of stones, once thought to mark solstices and seasons, may have lost their central meaning as people turned inward, toward smaller gatherings, more intimate rites. Some circles were left behind entirely, others were repurposed, reworked into new forms over centuries. The original vision, the great collective effort that shaped these landscapes, began to fray at its edges. And so we are left not with answers, but with questions. Was this a collapse, a transformation, or simply one phase of human memory and meaning giving way to another, quietly, without fanfare, beneath skies older than stone? There is no single answer to why these circles were built, and that silence, deep and enduring, is itself a kind of truth. The myth that they were calendars, precise astronomical observatories aligned with solstices or equinoxes, persists in popular imagination. Evidence from some sites does suggest possible correlations between stone placement and celestial events, but correlation is not proof of purpose. Many circles show no clear alignment, others have multiple alignments that could be chance or symbolic rather than functional. The idea that all stones were placed with precise intent to track the heavens ignores the complexity of Neolithic timekeeping, where accuracy was likely less important than ritual repetition and communal participation. Another persistent myth is that these circles were temples, places of worship in a modern sense. But we lack any artifact or structure within them consistent with religious practice, as understood later in history: no altars, no shrines, no inscriptions naming deities. The absence of such features does not mean there was no spiritual dimension. It may simply mean that spirituality expressed itself through form and place, not objects. We cannot know if the circles were sites for healing rites, ancestor veneration, or communal gatherings where identity was shaped through shared experience. We also do not know how many people built them, nor what social structure enabled such labor. The scale is undeniable. Some required hundreds of tons of stone moved over miles, but we have no written records to name the architects. Could it be that communities came together seasonally for weeks at a time? Or were these monuments crafted over generations by small groups with inherited knowledge? The deeper uncertainty lies in meaning itself. We cannot read the minds of those who raised the stones. We can observe their labor, trace patterns, speculate on intent, but we cannot recover what they meant to themselves. To claim certainty about purpose is to project our own needs onto a distant past. A mystery remains not because answers are missing, but because some questions were never intended to be answered in the way we now demand them. There is a kind of silence that settles over stone circles when dusk arrives and the wind stills, as if the stones themselves are listening. This silence does not speak to purpose, but it persists, stubborn in its presence, indifferent to time. What endures is less the monument than the act of making, the deliberate choice to move boulders too large for one man's strength, to shape them into circles with a precision that defies casual effort. That kind of labor does not emerge from mere ritual or passing whim. It suggests a shared commitment, something held in common across generations. The places where these stones stand are not random. They mark high ground, skyward views, ancient paths worn by footsteps long gone. The circles do not align with the sun or stars in ways we can definitively name, yet some patterns repeat, repeated attention to directionality, subtle geometry that may have tracked celestial rhythms or marked moments of seasonal change. We cannot say for certain what they meant, whether prayer, memory, gathering place, marker of kinship, because no written record survives from their time. And so the mystery endures not as a puzzle to be solved, but as an invitation to acknowledge that human meaning has always been layered and uncertain. These circles were built when language was still emerging, when identity formed through shared labor rather than paper or law. They stand today because they are made of stone, durable, indifferent, unchanging in their silence. To care about them is not to claim answers, but to admit that some questions matter more than the need for certainty. What remains is a quiet testament that people once came together with purpose, too vast to be measured by any single life, that they built something that could outlast empires, not because it was perfect, but because it was meant to last. And so we still walk among them, not to find answers, but to stand where others stood before us and listen to the wind between the stones.